We obviously have a different setup here this evening. We have a couple of mics strategically placed, but we need outside voices for anyone who's speaking from the tables. I've been told I have a big mouth, and so I'm sure that'll be no problem. Hello, Mayor. Good to see you clear down there. Yes. Loud voices, outside voices from here, but if anyone has to go to the podium, for example, if some of you that may not have a mic around you want to be more heard and want to go to the podium, please, one, do not touch the mic or the podium, if at all possible, but secondly, do not use your outside voice at the podium, only here around the table. It's just regular voice at the podium. So with that, we don't have to worry about whether any microphones or not are on. Ms. Bobbitt has joined us via telephone as permitted by guidance from the Ohio Attorney General. And so, Ms. Bobbitt, are you with us still?
I am. Thank you.
All right, and so we will turn it over to the chairperson and allow her to facilitate the finance meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the first resolution on the agenda is temporary resolution 50-20. It is a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund. This resolution is to cover the cost of the OPERS audit that has been requested by the state. This audit will encompass the census data and pensionable wages that were reported to the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System. Auditor Nettle, do you have anything to add?
No, you pretty much said it all. We got selected randomly by OPERS, and the state audit came to audit all of our 2019 records, and which we received a response today that they forwarded you that everything came out okay, but unfortunately this wasn't something that I prepared in my budget to do.
Great. Does anybody have any questions regarding this resolution? We will look to suspend and pass tonight. Mr. Stoden, will you be my second?
I will.
Great. No, it sounds like we're in theater.
I know, yeah.
Okay, the next resolution is temporary resolution 51-20. This is a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the Broad Mulberry Sewer Separation Project. This resolution is to cover the project work associated with the 2 out of the 3 storm sewer catch basins at the intersection between North Broad Street and Mulberry Street that need to be separated and tied into the storm sewer in order to meet the goals of the long-term control plan. Mr. James, do you have anything to add?
That description you gave pretty much covers the entire thing. We're at the mercy of the weather, so getting this passed quickly is going to be real important for that project to get done.
So I have it being suspended this evening, and I have Mr. Hall as your second. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Anybody have any questions on this resolution? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Wait,
What?
just a second. Did you have something you wanted to add, Denise?
I just wanted to tell you that this project is currently out for bid. We plan to move the bid date to April 6th. So we have no idea what's going to happen with bid prices. So we may be back on the 13th to modify this authorization, but we're hopeful.
Thank you, Denise.
Denise, what was that date again? I'm sorry.
The bid opening is going to be, April 7th. We're going to extend it to get past the governor's current order. But we are actively getting bidders. We've had a lot of interest in this project, and we'll be having a pretty good telephone conference tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else regarding 51-20? Okay, moving on, temporary resolution 52-20, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 101. This resolution is to adjust the budget to cover the cost of the real estate tax bill that was received for the Hunters Run Conservatory District Real Estate Special Assessment. This assessment tripled on the tax year for 2019, and it was not accounted for in the 2020 budget. Auditor Nettles, anything to add?
That's pretty much everything in a nutshell. It was just more of when we did the budget in the fall of 2019, I did not realize when the Hunters Run Conservatory District Board was going to Judge Trimmer this year, that Judge Trimmer made the choice to take us from a 5% to a 15%. Hunters Run, not just the city of Lancaster, but every real estate tax person in the Hunters Run Conservatory District. So I just need that so I can make sure that we cover our tax bill.
Any questions? Okay, we're going to suspend as well, and Mr. Stoughton, will you be my second?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, moving on. Temporary Resolution 53-20, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of utilities billing software for use by the Utilities Collection Department. This resolution is for the software upgrade for the Utilities Department. The current software program was purchased in the late 1990s and has significant limitations and needs to be updated. Mr. Martin, do you have anything to add?
So we've been interviewing several vendors, just finding out the need. It is important for us to go ahead and enter into this agreement here to try to get us a good software package. Of course, this will not have a general fund liability at all. This cost here will be dispersed through the enterprise funds because they will be collecting the funds for those departments. But we're hoping to get this engaged because they're gonna build it for us, and hopefully we'll have great improvements. One of the reasons we're leaving the current company we're with, we've seen a decline on their service, and we're questioning their future. And there's a lot at stake with this software, so we're trying to get ahead of it. It'll probably be typical of what we have with all software. We'll have an upfront cost, and then we'll have an annual maintenance cost. And so we're proceeding forward. Appreciate your suspension tonight. If you get this passed tonight, as we're trying to do with everything, we'd like to see that done.
Mrs. Teener, anything else to add? This is your resolution.
Yes, it is. This is just to go out for bid. Doesn't mean that we are voting on it tonight, that there is nothing that we have yet to let the public know. So Mrs. Bobbitt will be my second and it's first reading, and we'll just suspend tonight.
You want me to ask the Service Safety Director about, are we gonna get a lockbox for utilities?
I'm not prepared to answer that tonight, Mr. Stoughton. I know that's something you brought up to us before there, so anyway. Actually, Bob Wolfinger and I were just talking about it recently. Treasurer Wolfinger is back there. We got him.
Hi, Bob.
Almost in the corner.
Are you talking about a check collection lockbox or a cash lockbox?
Check collection. So I can, when people use online banking, they don't have to queue their bill 7 days in advance versus 1 day in advance.
Okay, I think we probably need there's different products, and I'm not sure we're on the same product. Bill pay on your personal computer, yes, you'll need to put that in ahead of time. The customer has the opportunity to allow the utilities office to debit their account directly,
Not what I'm talking
or
about.
they can do a check and it mails and it goes into a lockbox. That would be a collection lockbox.
I'm talking about people that should be able to queue a bill in their online banking system 1 day before it's due to the city, not 7 days, because they're getting a paper check from me, from my bank, who's writing a check on my behalf. They should be able to do a bank-to-bank transfer.
An EFT, electronic
That
funds
would be an
transfer.
ACH transaction, and we're not in a position to do ACH for retail.
Well, we should
That's a
be.
retail transaction.
We should be. It's someone's handling that check when it shows up. All right, if it's a bank-to-bank transfer, then you take away that labor, and really at that point any chance for error during that transaction. I just think it's time that we get on board with that.
I'm not aware of any bank will do a retail ACH initiated by the customer. That's how you get it next day.
How is it retail?
Retail
retail means high volume by consumers, and this is a consumer transaction.
What if I
The
say
ACH system is geared towards businesses and companies.
and we're not a business or a company?
To initiate the ACH,
I am sending you an ACH.
that's how you get the next day, or you do a wire transfer.
I think it's something we should look into a little bit more personally, because
I totally agree, but we do not have that ability through our bank to do it, number one.
So I would say that with this new software, as Mrs. Stone was mentioning, that's one of the things I'd like to see what else more we could do. But as you know, I'm having Bob Wolfinger assist us as I work with the management from the utilities collection, but we will definitely pursue that as we get more clarification of that.
Mrs. Teener.
So my AEP is utilities, and they take it right out of the, so maybe we need to check with AEP and see how they do it, because they take it right out. They don't have a problem.
Electronic check.
That's what Mr. Stoughton does not want.
No.
It's not
You can take it right now out of, you can take it right out of your checking account. That's what happens to AEP, AT&T.
AEP is a 2-day transfer, so if my bill's due on Wednesday, I've queued it up by the end of the day today, they'll get it on Wednesday. All right? All I'm saying is I should be able to basically do the same thing with my utility bill. It's not me telling Chase to mail a paper check to the city of Lancaster.
I agree, that's not a functional way to do it. No one should use it.
Well, that's not happening with AEP. All right, AEP is getting a transfer between Tom Stoughton's bank account at Chase and AEP's bank account, wherever that might be.
So is mine, but that's not, we'll need to take this offline. We have a lot of agenda items. We're confused on
Great.
the products.
Trying to convince them it's wrong.
Okay, so after a very vibrant discussion on that, I have Mrs. Bobbitt as your second.
Mrs. Bobbitt, yes.
Okay. All right. Next resolution is 54-20, a resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of Lancaster to negotiate and enter into a CHIP partnership agreement with the Board of Fairfield County Commissioners to file a combined application under the Community House Impact and Preservation CHIP program to address local housing needs. This resolution will allow the city of Lancaster to file a joint application with Fairfield County for the Community House Impact Program, otherwise known as CHIP. This joint application will increase the amount of eligible funding available to both the city and the county, and the fund amounts awarded will be specifically designated to each entity. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Well, they summed it up pretty good. Mr. Mayor, anything to add?
Yes. We have been approached by Community Action. They manage the county's CHIP program, and they thought it made a lot of sense to combine the two, because right now the way it works, they have a lot of infrastructure out there to manage this program. If a potential client calls in, first thing they have to do is say, do you live in the city or outside the city? If you live in the city, well, we can't help you. You have to call community development. If you don't live inside the city, then they can help, but they've got a lot of other programs that they can channel these people into if they're not eligible for CHIP, or even if they are, they have a lot of other programs that they administer that can that these potential clients can make use of. So it's a big benefit to the citizens. It's a one-stop shop, and it basically just takes that administration away from community development and puts it out there. We get the same amount of money. The money that we would get as a city, $250,000, is stipulated to be for citizens of Lancaster. It can't be rerouted out to county residents. So it seems to be a win-win for the city and the citizens of Fairfield County to enhance the services that they get through the CHIP program and other available programs.
I was just going to add to that, Mayor. I thought that the CHIP program actually to encourage joint, if you will, applications. Wasn't there additional funding actually
Well,
to both?
we determined that since we're in entitlement city, we're not entitled to any additional money.
That
Other
makes sense.
cities would be, but we're not,
I
since
got you.
we're in entitlement city.
All right.
I have one additional question. Is there an administrative fee for them handling the processing of this?
The fee that, the city gets is $10,000 for doing that, and then that would go to, the community action. It's part of the program, it's built into the program.
Okay, and it's designated specifically for
That's-
administration of the
right,
program?
that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
It's through the grant.
That makes sense.
Okay, does anybody have anything else regarding that resolution? Mr. Stoughton, will you serve a second?
Yes.
Okay. Temporary resolution 55-20. This is one we've all been waiting for over the last couple meetings. This has to do with the roof on the annex building, and it gives us a breakdown. What is being requested is $233,165 with $181,563 for the roof. $29,602 for the HVAC, which we talked about in the last meeting, and an additional $22,000 I called for like incidentals, like what ifs.
Yes.
Do you want to provide some additional details? I mean, I think we talked about it a lot, so I don't know if anybody has any additional questions. I think this is what we've been waiting for, is this breakdown.
So, I know it's a lot of money. I actually thought it might be a little bit higher. So the silver lining is I thought it would be $250, so I'm grateful for it, the price, but it's a lot of money. The big thing is we're choosing to go with a 30-year warranty, and I'm very much impressed with the warranty service provided by the person that's going to be installing this. They went out to bid. We got 3 bids in, and this is where we're at. We did have an asbestos remediation issue. It did impact that bid price as well. We had more asbestos up there than I anticipated, but it is what it is. So it does involve the crane that's going to be rented to lift the units off and then later put them back on. So we're trying to get in on the front end. As you know, a lot of flat roofs are being replaced every year. So we appreciate your consideration to finally look forward to this roof not leaking.
Okay, does anybody have any additional questions? Yes, Mr. James.
Just one real quick. This is a firm bid, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, the contingency is if we actually, after we strip it down, as you well know, sometimes you might have to replace a plywood or piece of board or something like that. So
Okay.
I will be very thoughtful about our contingency items that I have there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Bobbitt?
I believe I heard you say, city service director, that you, were talking to 3 different, companies. Is the one, are any of them local to Lancaster?
I don't know if I could say that. No, I don't think they're local in Lancaster because we don't have anybody in Lancaster that I would say I would put on top of a flat roof of this size, to be honest with you.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. We will also be looking for suspension. Mrs. Bobbitt, will you be my second, please?
I will.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Temporary resolution 56-20, a resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate with the county auditor in the FEMA Fund 240. 2018 Assistance to Firefighters Grant was awarded to us late in 2019. The grant scope was to allow us to replace our self-contained breathing apparatus system. The total portion the federal government has agreed to give us is $171,818.18. And I see Chief Ward at the podium who can provide us some additional color related to this resolution.
Okay, I sent everybody out a detailed package about all the incidentals with this first part of this legislation tonight. This is going to replace our old SCBA's, which were probably 15 years old. That too was a grant we got back in a while ago. This is upgraded to the newest standards of NFPA. It also, the biggest feature with these are now that instead of having 25% of your bottle left to get out of a dangerous situation, it allows us to get out at 33%. So that's one big feature. There's a lot of other features here. It's a big project. Like you said, the grant was for $171,000, but the whole total package, since this is going to be a 5,500 PSI project, our old bottles are 4,500 PSI. We have to do a lot of upgrades to our cascade system, which is our air refill station. We have to upgrade our tower for those and the bucket. We've got to change the fittings. So long story short, the total project for this was going to be $242,157. So a difference of $70,339.47. It's needed. It's going to have to be done in a couple of years. The feds have been very good to give us this kind of money, and I would hope that you would support that.
Mrs. Bobbitt, this is your resolution. Do you have anything to add?
Just wanted to tell the chief and the guys that have been working with him on this, that they've done a good job. It's some great grant monies to receive, and for safety, it's a plus for Lancaster and the firefighters. And Jack Matlin, Councilman Matlin, will be my second on this.
Yes.
Great.
The other portion of that legislation is new equipment for the fire truck that's coming in.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and jump there, because that's a different resolution.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll go ahead and jump to that one, which is 58-20, and then we'll come back to 57. So 58-20 is the resolution that will capture the difference between what the grant provided and what the project is going to cost, as well as the $44,300 that is needed to equip the new truck, right?
Exactly. Our goal is to have 3 trucks that are equally outfitted, so that if we take one out of service, we don't have to strip down the one that's going out of service to stock that one. So that's a benefit to the city. Also, if we had an all-call, we had to have engine companies come in off duty. It's nice to have a fully staffed, equipped truck. So that's the goal of this project here.
Okay, Mrs. Bobbitt, this is also yours, and I have Mr. McDaniel as your second.
That is correct.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for the chief on either one of these resolutions?
Yes, Jeff.
Just a point, this is not general fund money getting spent extra, it's fire impact money.
It is exactly a good point, Councilman. We have $602,000 in the fire impact money specifically for projects like this, and we've been able to do that with fire impact since about '05. That's the way we've been able to afford most of our equipment.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Chief. Now we'll go back up to Resolution 57-20. This is the resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to utilize CBIZ to evaluate the market and negotiate for employee benefits. This resolution is to allow for negotiations to begin for new health insurance for city employees. As was discussed last year during the budget process, the health insurance premiums went up substantially, and we are looking for ways to maintain coverage and reduce our costs.
Yes, and just, we do have, amongst many things, health insurance expenses are a huge part of our budget. And so it's our effort to try to see if we can reduce the future expenses. So we, as you know, we sent a termination to our current consortium that we're part of. We went out and talked to other entities like the county, other school districts who actually, many of them have referred CBIZ to us. So we got a lot of good references from them. So we are selecting them to go out and represent us and do this bid with some of our major healthcare providers. We have been very impressed with how they have successfully taken a school district, especially out of our current consortium that we're in, and move it into where we are going to become self-employed by ourselves. And we think this, and what we have already researched and found out, this will be significant cost saving for us in the future. So we need to engage with something by July the 1st as we change from our consortium to a new provider as a self-insured standalone entity ourselves. But they've had great success in this before, And so we're asking for you to give us that permission to proceed with CVS.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Martin? Okay, we'll be asking for suspension on this as well. Mrs. Bobbitt, will you be my second?
Very well.
All right. And those are all the resolutions that I have on the agenda. Is there anything I'm missing, resolution-wise? Okay. Moving on, do we have any departmental updates? Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I would relate that the bids for the summer paving program were opened on Friday, and Kikosing Instruction was a low bidder at $1,365,000. That will allow the primary streets and all the alternates to be done, 9 streets in total. In addition to that, the Fair Avenue from High Street to Sheridan Drive will be resurfaced this year. And also, there are a number of streets, most in River Valley Highlands, that will be crack sealed and microsurfaced. So that's the extent of the summer paving program. Kikosing is ready to get started. They want to start, as a matter of fact, April the 6th with the concrete work for the handicap ramps, et cetera. So it's a good bid season for that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions regarding the mayor's update? Any other departmental updates?
Good evening. Deb Julian in my department is the city blood drive coordinator. There is a desperate need for blood. The Red Cross has scheduled what would normally be the Fairfield County Job and Family Services, but because county has closed the building, they've scheduled a blood drive for Thursday, right here in council chambers, from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. As I said, they desperately need blood. We encourage anybody that can come out to come out and give blood. Blood drives are one of the areas that is excluded from the governor's order. You can schedule an appointment at 1-800-RED-CROSS. Visit redcrossblood.org, or they are taking walk-ins. They will be screening and practicing social distancing.
Just to confirm the time again, please.
Thursday, March 26th from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m.
I knew I didn't get that right. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other departmental updates? Yes, Mr. Martin.
So as you know, we're under a national health crisis right now. Many people have seen that our offices are not open to the public. We're going to continue that status in a desire to protect our employees. Per what the governor released yesterday, many of the things that we do in the city of Lancaster are an essential function. I want you to know and be confident we're going to be delivering safe water. We're going to be gladly treating our sewage. We're going to deliver natural gas. We're going to provide police and fire, and there's other things that we have to do as a city. So, but we are working through the process. My day's been very busy trying to make some decisions about who can we afford to not have in our environment. We're actually trying to work through about possibly having some work from home if that's feasible. And so there's a lot of things we're doing. We just want you to know we're trying to keep our employees safe, our residents safe, and we ask that as we're doing here tonight, it's a great testament of what we're trying to do, keeping a social distancing of the right distance, because this is a real thing that's here. Hopefully we will not become countries like Italy or Spain that have been through really tragic times. Some people want to deny this, but it's a reality. And we're grateful what Fairfield County is doing. We're trying to follow their lead as well. But be patient with me. I'm involved with a lot of decisions sorry I couldn't call you back earlier today about something, but we're working through this. As you know, the ball is continually moving. We're trying to react to what was released to us yesterday. And so we're moving forward. And if there's things we need to do, we'll try to get to council but we are making a lot of administrative decisions. I appreciate what Law Director Olam is going to be pushing out to you tonight, and some of the things that we're trying to be able to make decisions about when we are facing this national crisis, which I believe is a true crisis.
Thank you. Any other departmental updates? Okay. Do you want to do both ordinances?
That's fine.
Okay. So I will turn the meeting over to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We do have a couple of items to prepare for tonight. Temporary Ordinance 6-20, amending the zoning map for 12.64 acres behind East Main Street. This coming through code enforcement. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, sir. This will, it looks like we have to have a public hearing, so this will just be first reading on this, I assume.
Yeah, it'll be first reading on this, and we're going to schedule a public hearing, I think, once we kind of get past all of this and figure out when we can get together and make that happen. So at this point, I don't think we're going to plan to schedule one quite yet, but one will be required before we can move forward with this. Any questions on Temporary Ordinance 620? If not, then we have the ordinance that was walked in tonight, was emailed to you prior to the council meeting, Temporary Ordinance 720, an ordinance authorizing emergency measures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're experiencing. Is this coming through law? Through finance? Oh.
Through finance.
Oh, through finance. Well, it makes sense that it comes through finance only because as you read through the provisions, it allows the mayor and the auditor and the chairperson of the finance committee to make decisions in the absence of our ability to meet together as a council. So as you read through, you'll see what opportunities and powers are given to that group, which must meet and decide with a majority vote between the three as to whether or not those things will move forward. Please note, though, that as this is written, one, it only happens if this body is unable to meet. Two, if any decision is made that would ordinarily come to this body for approval, it will come to this body after the fact once we're able to reconvene and have council meetings once again. So I think those are sort of the critical components of this ordinance. Does anyone have any questions or want to discuss this as we move into the main meeting, or before we move into the main meeting? Law Director Olam, anything you want to add?
No, not if there's any questions, not at this
Okay.
time.
Mr. Hall.
So after the emergency has passed, then this what will we do with this legislation?
The legislation technically as written can't be enacted any further once council is able to convene based on what I see. I suppose we could rescind it at the point that we're able to get back together, but the fact that we're able to get together would render this process unusable in essence, because it requires our inability to get together before it can happen. So if we're able to meet, then you know this would not necessarily go very far. If we're unable to meet, then that group of three will have the power to address critical and necessary things that keep the health and safety of the city at the forefront, and then those decisions would come back around to city council after the fact.
That's helpful, thank you.
I would also add to that, if you look at the last sentence of section 4, just says these powers may be exercised as long as a state of emergency exists. So once that is lifted, this would cease to be relevant, and as President Uhl said, and council is unable to meet. So those are really the triggering mechanisms, if you will, for one, its usage. Council can't meet, and two, once the declaration of emergency is lifted by the governor, then that would go away as well.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, Mr. Stoughton.
Is this specific to this particular emergency? Or is this, we should, I believe, have something on the books like this for any time we're in an emergency state like this?
This is specific to this.
Yeah, if it's specific to COVID, but I think, shouldn't we have in our ordinances?
So we've had this discussion, the mayor, the law director, and I believe once we get past this, we'll have the opportunity to talk about what we should or can, as a statutory city, codify into our ordinance to allow for this to happen, particularly in my mind if there was some sort of emergency that was central or specific only to Lancaster. And we weren't under these orders from the state, but yet we had some major issue here where we needed to, to make some of this possible in the absence of our meeting. And so we've talked about it. I think once we get back, it's a discussion that needs to continue forward. But this one is specific only to this emergency right now. Other questions? We're going to need a second.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Bobbitt, you'll second this, please?
I will.
Very good, thank you. And also, Mr. McDaniel, we need a second on 6.
Yes.
Who would second?
Let's see, economic development. Tom, would you second that?
I will.
Okay, so Mr. Stoughton will second 6. Very good. All right, and then Ms. Teener had mentioned to me that she'd like to discuss Resolution 4520 very quickly, so we can do that now if you'd like.
Yes, this was the one regarding the person that was going to be from part-time at Olivedale to full-time. And right now they're not in, Olivedale is not, they closed for now because of this epidemic. So I didn't know if maybe we should either table this or just go ahead and make it a second, and then when we meet again, because this would make her a full-time employee. And then, payment, I assume that the part-time employees are being paid if they're not working?
Right now, for the things, as far as I'm aware, everybody that is working is being paid. Right now, for Parks Department and their part-time, I would make the assumption if the part-time people are not working, they're not being paid.
Okay, so the full-time, so I don't know if we should, so if we would pass this, of course, second reading tonight. If it would get passed, then she would get that when she came back to work, or she would not at this time. That was my kind of confusion with this.
Well, I'm thinking on this one, was he not attempting to make this person a full-time?
Yes.
So at that point, was he going to have them do other duties? Or, I mean, I don't have the answers to these questions. I don't know.
Well, I know we wanted to pass some things tonight to get it off the table, because we don't know when we're gonna meet again.
But I'm not sure what he was trying to do.
So I would say yes, she is currently part-time, and passing this, we're not doing these things, she's not working right now, so I would not move it up. I'm gonna recommend to the board that they're not gonna move it up to full-time at this time until the full-time
Okay,
board
that was
has
just
it.
my-
And that's the right thing to do, Ms.
Yes,
Diener, so.
because I was
Right.
wanting to make sure, so
Correct.
just second,
And we really don't know when we're gonna
Right.
restore that. As you well know, many of our seniors, actually Allerdale's closed, so
Yes, that's what
we're providing a lot there, yes.
because that's where she would be, so that was just my question. So I guess we'll just do second and 3 readings tonight, I guess. I mean,
It's not specific, it's reading specific.
Okay.
Okay. So I think second reading on that
Second,
will be
okay.
just fine then.
Okay.
Yeah, we were kind of having a discussion as to whether to table it or not, but we can just leave it
right,
on the
'cause I know there was
agenda.
things we wanted to try to get off the table tonight so that we could move forward, but I didn't think that was something.
I think
we
a
should-
second reading on this is
Okay.
appropriate. Yeah, okay, very good.
All right.
Any other items to address before we move back to the chairperson and into the regular meeting? Okay, then I'll toss back to the chairwoman.
Thank you, President Wool. Are there any other items for finance? Okay, not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn?
Thank you, Mrs. Bobbitt. Do I have a second?
You do.
All right, we are adjourned at 6:39 PM.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:45.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
Almost everyone needs a car to get from point A to point B, and many families have 2 or more cars. At Carriage Company, located at 1031 North Memorial Drive in Lancaster, we specialize in hard-to-find used cars. We can help you find exactly what you're looking for.
Come into the Carriage Company and check out our sweet deals.
Stop by today and let us help you, or visit us online at carriagecompany.com.
Sweet!
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we come to you today once again thankful for your many blessings, for how you continue to work in our life and continue to protect each one of us. We're obviously in the midst of a crisis here in our area, in our state, and across the country and around the world. We ask that you would continue to work in this situation. We pray for medical professionals, first responders, and those who are continually being put in harm's way. May you bless them and keep them safe. We pray for those who have contracted the virus and have become ill. We ask that you would touch and heal them, Lord. And tonight we pray for those who have been impacted by this in some other way than physically. We think specifically of those who have lost their job and lost income because of the many, many closings around our communities. We ask that you would be with them during this time as well. We have many things to do here tonight. We ask for your leadership and guidance as we go about them, and we'll give you all the praise and glory as we do it. In Jesus' name, amen. Please join me as we call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As we start, before I ask the clerk to call the roll, let me just once again reiterate, those around the table, please speak very, very loudly, for there are microphones around the room that are working to pick you up. For those of you in the audience who will be speaking at the podium, please do not touch the podium. Please do not touch the microphone, and use only your normal speaking voice there, because the microphone will be right in front of you, so there's no need to yell or use a louder voice than normal once you're at the podium. And yes, thank you very much. You also will not be asked to sign in tonight. That means that we need you to very clearly and slowly state your name and address for the record so that it can be recorded in the minutes. We're not asking you to sign in or pass any clipboard around this evening. With that, we'll ask the clerk call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Here.
Mrs. Downauer.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. James.
Here.
Mr. Matlin.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Mr. Stoughton.
Here.
Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of council are in attendance this evening, with Ms. Bobbitt being in attendance per the guidelines from the Attorney General to local government. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated March 9th, 2020.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Series of emails regarding email to Eric Keener referred to this evening, submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Series of emails regarding notice of public hearing number 1, City of Lancaster FY 2020 CDBG program, submitted by Executive Director of Community Development, Linda Berge. Email dated March 12, 2020 regarding cancellation of the Safety Committee meeting, submitted by Mrs. Bobbitt. Email dated March 13, 2020 regarding the financial fallout begins, transit funding, in retaliation of COVID-19, submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated March 14, 2020 regarding timber top legislation, submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated March 15, 2020 regarding updates, submitted by President Ohl. Email dated March 16, 2020 regarding cancellation of Economic Development Committee meeting, submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated March 16, 2020 regarding info on upcoming council meetings, submitted by President Ohl. Email dated March 16, 2020 regarding cancellation of the IT Telecom Committee meeting, submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Email dated March 16, 2020 regarding cancellation of Code Enforcement and Zoning Committee meeting, submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated March 17, 2020 regarding COVID community information from DFH 3-20, submitted by Service Safety Director Paul Martin. Email dated March 17, 2020 regarding roof repair of City Annex building, submitted by Service Safety Director Paul Martin. Email dated March 17, 2020 regarding cancellation of the Law Committee meeting, submitted by Mr. Hall. Email dated March 18, 2020 regarding timber top annexation and zoning, submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated March 18, 2020 regarding Lancaster Vision Animation, submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated March 19, 2020 regarding import information for Monday's meeting, submitted by President Ohl. Email dated March 19, 2020 regarding cancellation of the Service Committee meeting, submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated March 21st, 2020 regarding update meeting Monday, submitted by President Ohl. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding update meeting Monday, submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding update meeting tomorrow, submitted by President Ohl. And finally, an email dated March 23rd, 2020 regarding Finance Committee agenda, submitted by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are. Notice to the legislative authority of a new liquor license to DG2 Properties LLC, doing business as Doghouse Tavern, located at 701 Reese Avenue and Patio, Lancaster, Ohio 43130, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. Email dated March 10, 2020 regarding email to Eric Kerner, referred to this evening, submitted by Eric Keener, excuse me. Email dated March 17, 2020 regarding timber top, submitted by Elizabeth Huffman. Email dated March 20th, 2020 regarding timber top, submitted by Lauren Peterson. Series of emails regarding Seriously, submitted by Mark Nusser. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding live stream, submitted by Kelly Prince. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top annexation and zoning, submitted by Robert Huffman. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top, March 23rd, 2020, submitted by Lauren Peterson. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top, submitted by Terry and Rhonda Cochran. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top and my neighborhood, submitted by Marty Stover. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding Lemon 6 million payroll, submitted by Marty Stover. Email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top, submitted by Connie Gherkin. And finally, an email dated March 22nd, 2020 regarding timber top, submitted by Kelly Prince.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have no special presentations or awards tonight. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
At this time, City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of Lancaster to address City Council on any item or issue that they would like. With the limited number of people in the room tonight, those that were specifically invited, I think, know why you're here. The process will remain the same. We'll ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Again, you do not need to sign in tonight. Please note that while council members may choose to do so at a later portion of the meeting, they will not directly respond to any questions or comments you have at this time. In accordance with the rules of council, we'll ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. With that, we'll invite you forward and again remind you to speak in a normal tone, to not touch the podium or the microphone as you come. Is there anyone who'd like to address City Council this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Connie Gherkin, and I live at 2214 Lancaster Drive. My husband George and I have been in the real estate profession for over 41 years, focusing primarily on the city of Lancaster. I have said it before, and I will say it again, that we take so much pride in promoting the amenities of this city. That is why we care what happens here. Most of us are not opposed to the Timber Top being annexed into the city. However, we are opposed to the proposed zoning of this type of development. Timber Top is not an acceptable location for the different types of zoning being proposed. This is a residential area, and Timber Top is surrounded by single-family residential neighborhoods in all directions, regardless of how this may already have been portrayed. I have sold homes in all these residential neighborhoods bordering Timber Top, including Brookdale Subdivision, North Columbus Street, across from Timber Top, Woodland Heights, and Nettie and River Valley Highlands. The most recent two were on Lancaster and Old Ridge Court, both border Timber Top woods. The location enhanced the demand for these homes, and both had multiple offers the first day. Home values will be affected in these residential neighborhoods. The positive attributes with the trees, hills, open land, breathtaking scenic views, backyard privacy, and wildlife will be negated if this type of development is allowed to happen. Again, most of us are not opposed to annexation, but it is not suitable for this type of mixed zoning to allow this development. Residential single-family zoning is much better used for Timber Top. The need and demands are real and important. I pray it is important for each of you also. Please do not destroy the aesthetics of our city. What makes our city unique is our parks, our downtown fountain, our gazebo, our Georgian, one of many historic structures, and our Timber Top. Annexation, yes. Proposed type of zoning for this development, please, please, please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gerk, for being here. Is there anyone else who'd like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Mr. Huffman.
My name is Robert Huffman, 1580 Woodland Heights Lane, Northwest. First, we'd like to thank you again for allowing me to address the council. I do appreciate this greatly. I've spoken many times of concerns about the Timber Top property. Timber Top, with its French Manor House, rolling hills, towering trees, is a landmark in Lancaster. What is approved by you and how the development is carried out will not only greatly affect me personally, but all the other neighborhoods of Timber Top also. The impact will also affect the heart of Lancaster and these changes to this unique beauty and irreplaceable site. My greatest concern all along has been the possibility of zoning the development parts of Timber Top as commercial. As you can see, if you look at aerial images of the area, this is a residential area made up of several residences And these neighborhoods have been around since the 1950s, and some of the neighborhoods are still new and in development currently. An influx of commercial enterprises will trigger a downward spiral in these neighborhoods, and also in our home values and our quality of life. My secondary concern is the scope and type and density of the planned development. Limit Development is proposed inserting so many different types of higher density housing into this neighborhood, including apartments, duplexes, garden condos, a senior living center. The existing neighborhood consists almost exclusively of single-family homes, with few multifamily homes that exist in our neighborhood that do not positively impact the surrounding single-family homes. Even when they were in their best condition, Fox Meadows, Hillcrest, and the apartments on Scenic Drive and Whittier Drive have had a neutral impact. But that's not been the case for many decades now. I do believe that Limit Development will partner with a developer who will build quality, nice, multifamily properties. But what will the impact of these properties be in the next 20 and even 30 years down the future? In summary, the existing Timbertop area communities are neighborhoods where families put down roots. We raise our children there, we push strollers, we bicycle, we walk our dogs down those streets. We hike through the woods and we explore and live in touch with nature. If commercial development or high density development is allowed, this will detrimentally impact the core of that community and the lives, and this is something that can't be reversed. I ask Limit Development to please consider the density and what you're putting in this area in your plans. And I ask City Council to just urge a vote of no for commercial. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Is there anyone else who'd like to address City Council? Ms. Stover.
Good evening. My name is Marty Stover, and I live in the Brookdale subdivision at 406 Scott Drive. My beautiful older neighborhood is turning young again, and I'm very excited about that. As the life cycle ends and houses go up for sale, our younger generation are attracted to this beautiful neighborhood too. With the warmer weather, families are emerging from their homes to enjoy the quiet solitudes that our streets and our community provide. With no sidewalks, the only avenue for walking is via the street. With no through traffic, we all know that we watch out for all foot traffic, including adults, kids, and/or animals, not to mention an occasional deer. The Brookdale subdivision was established in the early 1960s with stubs located at 4 different points in the neighborhood. One has been closed and a house now sits in its place. The other one sits beside my house on Scott Drive and now is in a floodplain. I assumed it's abandoned by the city. And the other two are at the north end side of Hawthorne Avenue and Cold Spring Drive. For 60 years, these stubs have remained untouched and connectivity has never been an issue with the city of Lancaster. With no activity, these stubs should be considered abandoned. How can Lancaster City open up a 60-year-old neighborhood and conform it to the current codes and ordinances? Our subdivision feels very safe as there is only one way in and one way out. Egress and ingress were not even thought about in the 60s. We all watch out for one another and notice strange cars and wrongdoings. Trying to bring something 60 years old up to code is extremely cost prohibitive. The city of Lancaster has the authority and the wherewithal to stop the egress and the ingress on Old Ridge Court and Hawthorne Avenue and leave these areas alone. To quote the Sunday, March 22nd Lancaster Eagle Gazette, city officials were quoted to say, "Traffic operates like water. finding the path of least resistance. If Hawthorne Avenue is opened up, this will be the path of least resistance because of the traffic light at Whittier Drive and North Columbus Street. I have always stated that City Council should vote no on annexation and no for supplying city services. If I had to compromise, I would say to vote yes on annexation and yes to zoning with changes to reflect only single-family dwellings with an avenue in Timbertop for their subdivision to use as an egress and an ingress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Is there anyone else who'd like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Mr. Peterson.
Hello, I am Lauren Peterson, and I live at 1101 Green Meadow Avenue. Since last fall, the Lancaster Planning Commission, and then in 2020, Lancaster City Council, have met many times with both city administration and members of the public communicating their positions, both pros and cons, on Lemon Developers' project interests in 2200 North Columbus Street. Many, as I am sure you will agree, know these more than 76 acres as Timbertop. Now finally, we are at the fork in the road, and maybe, just perhaps, we see the light at the end of our tunnel of debate, questions, speculations, hopes and ambitions, and yes, indeed, fears. A tunnel is the metaphor through which, for many of us, the journey has been. As a tunnel, we have experienced little light, and we have found ourselves squinting ahead toward understanding. Our map has been the vast acreage of Timbertop, dissected and delivered to Council in late 2019. Never has such a delivery and consideration been received with such huge ramifications. 4 distinct zoning changes and annexation from Greenfield Township into the city of Lancaster are on the table finally this evening. More apartments, senior care and residences, and commercial and single-family homes have been earmarked by Lemon and duly noted on a project map, though their specifics are often met with still, to this evening, questions, as mentioned earlier. The legacy of this current 2020 City Council is indeed to take this unprecedented, challenging decision, pause, and ask before proceeding, firstly, do we know absolutely all we need to know at this moment in time to wisely vote? And equally importantly, if there are doubts or sensitive thoughts you still struggle to resolve, then vote accordingly. If each of you serving this city council has had all your questions answered now, and you know fully you are serving your constituents' wishes, then each of you will never have to look back and question if you made the right decisions. I ask, as others have, for a vote of yes for annexation of the Timbertop property and a vote no to the proposed zoning. This shall be the light we sought at the end of this tunnel. Your legacy will be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Is there anyone else who'd like to address Lancaster City Council this evening?
I kind of forgot to say something. Do I have a few more minutes?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sir, I see you there. Are you planning to address City Council this evening? I'm looking at you, boss.
I'm not allowed to.
If you want to try to say what she was going to say, sir, you can work that out in the next 10 seconds. That's fine, but otherwise we'll need to move on here.
They received it all. Thank you, buddy.
Good evening, bear with me. We're really in luck. If I was tell you what I thought would be really bad, I'll try to read this. The following was what I said to the city council members regarding Lemon's $6 billion payroll. Food for thought about what appeared in the Sunday, March 22nd, Lancaster Gazette article. Mayor Schaffner was quoted as saying, and with Senior Living Center, Lemon expects that payroll will be around $6 million a year. With all levels of a job available, I can't seem to get the math to come out now. Here are my calculations. 6 positions at $100,000 per year, 600,000 equals $48.07 per hour. 60 positions at $70 per year, $4,200,000 comes out to $33.65 per hour. 80 positions at $30 per year, $30,000 per year, please. $1,200,000 equals $14.42 per hour. Total payroll, $6 million. These numbers seem to be quite inflated, both employee numbers and hourly rate wages. But if I reduce the annual pay rate, it gets worse. Even if this development were generating $6 million in payroll during the construction phase perhaps, but doubtedly on an ongoing basis, is estimated $105,000 in payroll income tax reality worth devastating the surrounding neighborhood. This is sent from her windows. As an individual myself, I follow up with what my wife said. We do not discourage building houses. That's what we do for a living. We sell them. However, what they're trying to do in this particular development is not with single residents. We're trying to make at least 3 or 4 different types of individual construction areas within, and I have not yet, after listening to this presentation 4 times, do I know what they're really going to try to do. And I don't think anybody here can possibly tell me, because you've all been here and heard the same thing. So I really would say the best thing we could do right now would be to get rid of everything on the table and start over again in a positive note, so we're all working together instead of some of us out here and some of us out here. I've been on a lot of projects in my life, and every time we've had one everybody agreed on, it worked great. But as soon as you get people thinking this way and this way, you're bound to have trouble. What I wish for tonight is that you do vote the way we would like for you to. Yes, we want them to build, but we would like to build with what we can live with in the existing community. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Sir, thank you so much. If you don't mind to just state your name and address for the record.
Pardon me?
Your name.
Name and address, sir.
Oh, you've got.
I know, Mr.
I'm
Gherkin.
George Gherkin.
Yes, sir.
She puts up with me all the time, so I must be halfway decent. I live at 2214 Lancaster Drive, and people, I do want to say this also. I know a little bit about what you do, and you're to be commended for doing it. I tried it once many, many years ago before somebody even thought about doing this thing. And I have to say, my heart goes out to you. I wish you well. In this case, I hope you agree with me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gherkin. Thank you for being here. All right, I'm not missing anyone, right? Everyone who wants to address City Council has had the opportunity. Very good. Are there reports of standing committees? Sorry. you take your time. Thank you each one for being here tonight as we move forward with our meeting. We appreciate it.
There are two Finance Committee meeting minutes for March 9th, 2020, submitted by Mrs. Downhour, and Water Pollution Control minutes for March 11th, 2020, submitted by Mr. James.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
Keep looking for Miss Bobbitt over there. She's not there. Thank
She sounds
you.
louder tonight,
I know,
too.
she is louder. I know she's right in front of me. We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The reports of special committees.
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening. Mr. Stoughton, do you have a motion for us?
I do. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to go outside the schedule of regular business to discuss and act on all resolutions and ordinances associated with timber top.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go outside of the regular order of business and address all items, resolutions, discussion, and ordinances relative to timber top annexation and zoning. All those, we need to do a roll call on this? I think we do.
I don't think we do, but that's...
I think we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. We are outside of the regular order. And let me just say, what we're going to do now is have a discussion regarding all of the legislation before anything really comes to the floor so that we can debate this as we need to, both the annexation and the zoning. We're also going to invite the developer to come and enter into a discussion with us. As we have questions, they'll be able to answer those. And so I want to just, as we go forward, try to do this just as orderly as possible. I know there's going to be lots of discussion and debate, and so we're going to begin by tossing it back to Mr. Stoughton, who made the motion to go outside of the regular order, and begin with him. Mr. Stoughton.
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Do you want to move on to someone else who has something to say? or
No,
are you ready to go?
I just have a few comments. To start the ball, and then I assume you'll bring the developer up at some point in time.
Yes, that's fine.
You know, we've received lots of emails, and specifically, you know, the kind of the recurring themes seem to come up: traffic study, flooding issues. You know, it's always traffic and flooding, and you know, I'm confident in the traffic study portion of the discussion. I think Mitch Nolan, our city engineer, provided us a very comprehensive review of that study, and the fact it was inclusive of everything that sits out there today and for what is planned. So, you know, as a city council person, I have to sit here and I have to assume to some degree that the information I get from my city engineer is, you know, on the level and accurate. The second thing that I've heard is the concern about flooding issues, and if I've heard it once, I've heard it a couple times to where actually, and I don't know what those true flooding issues are up there in the Highlands. I've seen pictures of a high rain event, but I haven't seen aside from the problems that we had that we've addressed, which was certainly a faulty manufacturing process. The flooding issues I saw were a picture of a rain event in June a couple years ago. You know, there was we had 1.25 inches of rain in 1 hour. So while there might be water up there, I have heard time and again from folks on our side being the city, that this development will actually help the flooding situation there on that property. Then the other two other things that I've read, I've heard something called blank check. We're handing the developer a blank check. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure have we handed you a blank check, Mr. Perez?
I'm Tony Perez. I'm
I know you
401
are.
South Main Street, North Canton.
Have we handed you a blank check?
You have not.
Thank you. So we have not handed them a blank check. I believe he wrote a big check to buy this particular piece of property. So we're gonna try to extract the emotion out of this, and we're going to try to go through the guts of what is and what isn't specific to this particular development. And then finally, I've heard that we talk about The compromise is, well, the only compromise we'll accept is yes to annex it in, but no, not to zone it in. Well, again, this developer made the investment in that property. I don't know what the price was, but I suspect it was substantial. And our role here is to consider all that, as well as consider the concerns of the folks that live in the neighboring properties around that. So, as we sit here and have this discussion, the most important thing that we can do is separate fact and emotion and make sure that we have that discussion on this particular parcel on the merits in which it's been presented. So, Mr. President, with that, I'll yield to someone else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stoughton. I think that frames this up very well. And I'm happy to go around, and anyone who's interested in engaging in discussion can do so. And then at some point, we'll allow the developer as well to provide some comments and thoughts. Mr. James, I see your hand.
This is not an easy decision, no matter what you do. There's going to be some people that are not happy. And as a freshman council person, I would be the one to catch the two most controversial issues within the first month of my tenure in this office. And I've entered into a lot of prayer on how to make this decision, and I have to do it on a lot of facts. And I do respect what Mayor Scheffler said last week, or the last meeting I should say, that he was recruited for this position, and someone then quoted him as saying he didn't like his job. Well, that's not the case. I too was recruited for this position, and I've enjoyed what I've been able to do. I have met, through this process, a significant number of extremely nice people. I've had the opportunity to walk onto a property I'd never seen before, Timber Top, multiple times with people to discuss their concerns. I've seen pictures of the runoff, and initially, I know a lot of people think that the property has a lot of good timber on it. Well, it isn't. Some of it is extremely in bad shape, and if nothing's done with Timber Top, the runoff issue will not be resolved. My daughter, many years ago, lived on Marble Drive, so I am more than familiar with the Whittier neighborhood, and have always been concerned as we're walking through the streets, which is not a good idea because cars and people don't mix, no matter how you do it, and no matter how much you claim that somebody coming into the neighborhood is watching out for people. With the amount of distraction everybody has now with their phones, the opportunity for somebody to get run over is pretty darn good. But anyway, not having 2 points of entry and exit from that particular area always concerned me as I'm sitting at the stoplight in Whittier after I've dropped my kids off at Tarhee Elementary School for many years. I'm thinking if something happens in that intersection that blocks it and anything else in that neighborhood happens, the safety people can't get there unless they drive through somebody's yard. And in most cases, it didn't look like that was even possible. So the benefits of this have not really been, I don't think, responsive to the fever pitch opposition of this. And once again, as I said, this is not an easy decision. Things always change. In years past, when I had the opportunity, younger, a little less heavier than I am now, I'd run from my home north of the Forest Road Cemetery all the way out in North Columbus to what used to be Moore's and the lumber store. And I don't know how many of you remember that. And I could run that total distance, 3.5 miles out, 3.5 back, safely, until they started building homes in a place called Dominion. And having grown up on a farm, that really bothered me a lot because that farmland was productive, it was beautiful. And since I've had the opportunity to walk on to Timber Top, none of that's lost on me. I understand that. But now a lot of people who live in River Valley Highlands, as it's been renamed, have a nice place to live. And I can appreciate that. In addition to that, and I know I've told this to several people, in April of last year, I almost lost my wife. And after she had 2 major surgeries, fortunately, the good Lord was with us, and she survived and is in recovery, still requires some care. But when we needed a rehab facility after we got her out of the hospital, the intensive care, etc., we couldn't get her into one in Lancaster because there was no room. I had to end up spending multiple days driving back and forth to Pickerington to visit my wife. when indeed what we have here is an opportunity to address a lot of elder care issues that we have, in addition to providing some of the single-family dwellings. A lot of heartburn I had over the initial request for zoning was commercial general. I don't want to see that there. Your neighborhood is not suited for that, and that, once again, as I said, created a lot of heartburn for me. So I'm very much sensitive to that particular issue. But I also recognize that things change. Nothing ever stays the same. And I have an elderly friend, 82 years old, that actually, his family owned where Whittier, all that development is, and they owned Timber Top as well. He farmed that as a young man. And when they ended up selling that property, it dismayed him. Unfortunately, you know, he had no opportunity to stop that or oppose it or in any way, but at some point in time, a city council, both for River Valley Highlands and for all the Whittier project, voted to give you guys a good place to live. And you deserve that. And denying that for others, I think, is probably not fair. But I'm going to get off my soapbox now. If anybody has any other questions for me, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Once again, it's not an easy issue. The fever pitch of opposition, I understand. The internet certainly can magnify and amplify that. I can also assure you that any accusations that's been made toward the city administration, myself, or any of my council colleagues of being inappropriate or having our hand out is mildly irritating to me, but it will not taint my view one way or the other.
Thank you, Mr. James. Is there anyone else that would like? Are you stealing my tissues? Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Hall.
Yes, just very quickly, this is really a question for Mr. Perez. Mr. Huffman voiced concerns about the potential for the development to have an adverse effect on property values in the area. I know that there's probably no way that we can forecast with complete assurance that one way or the other, but I would be interested in hearing what your corporation's experience is in other similar developments regarding impact on property values.
Yes. So, and thank you for tonight and everybody to be here under these conditions. But you know, in the past, our projects, obviously, we spend a lot of money on our projects. We spend millions of dollars. We are holding and owning these projects forever. We manage these projects, so we're not wasting money on some of these things. And everywhere that we've gone in the past, obviously it's not hurt property value. I don't know, I don't quite get that whole thing that people have come up to us and said. Particularly in Timber Top, in the multifamily piece, we won't be the developer on the multifamily piece, the apartment piece. But with the purchase agreement that we have with the developer there, we are going to oversee the architectural design. We're going to oversee all the plans, and they're going to be checked by us. So we can hold that assurance that they're not going to come in and put something that's just substandard. With our investment and with everything else that's there, we want to make sure that it's upheld, and our investment is definitely our values are there. So.
Again, from the standpoint of your existing developments,
yes.
Do you have anything that is similar enough to the proposed development at Timber Top that has been in existence for a long enough period that you could give us some sense of what the overall impact has been on that area?
We have definitely senior buildings in 19 different places in the state of Ohio. And everywhere that we've been, North Canton, for example, is still as nice as it was 22 years ago. We've not seen property values go down. Obviously, we've seen them come up. So I feel that that was one of our first buildings that we built, our first senior building that we built in the state of Ohio. So no, I feel like it definitely has not had any type of impact on it. So.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone else who wants to chime in on this discussion? Yes, Ms. Downer.
So as just following what Mr. Stoughton said, we've heard the concerns about traffic. And the traffic study was very important to have done. There are still some follow-ups that need to happen. So Mitch, I wanted to thank you for addressing the concern that I had in an email to everybody. Just know that there is still a follow-up that has to be done to the traffic study. If it's not done in accordance, Mitch's group will not approve it. So there is an additional approval that has to happen once the traffic study is completed. I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. To address the property values, I personally went and looked at the apartment complex that they're proposing up near Lenworth. It was a beautifully done complex. It is not cheap, so it is not going to be lower income housing. This is very upper echelon apartments. Also, Danbury, which is the senior living facility that is on Snoffer Road, not too far from this apartment complex, is also a very tastefully done community. It has surrounding single family homes, very similar to what they're asking for at Timbertop. And I can safely tell you that in that area, if property values decreased, I would be extremely surprised. Just based on what my husband and I saw in that general area. So I understand the concerns. I drive back and forth to Columbus. I used to take Columbus Street kind of as a shortcut. Given the fact that that entrance to 33 is going to be closed, there is no benefit for me to take Columbus Street anymore unless I live there or I had business to do on Columbus Street. So I do think, based on what Mitch said in one of our previous meetings, I do think the traffic flow on Columbus Street is going to change and it is going to be adjusted. For those people who commute back and forth to Columbus, they're not going to take that way anymore. They're either going to take the bypass or they're going to take Memorial Drive. With the newly renovated traffic lights, if you go up Memorial Drive, you can get there, no problem, you're not stopped. So going forward, do I think traffic is a concern? Yes, I do think traffic's a concern. But I think that we need to trust our engineering department to follow up and make sure that everything that is done is followed along the city protocol. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Downhour. We were just working to get Ms. Bobbitt back. Ms. Bobbitt, you there?
I am, and I have some comments whenever it's my turn.
It is your turn right now. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. First off, done a lot of research with the Lemon Company, and I believe they're a wonderful developer. I know it was mentioned earlier, but I wanted to mention it again. I hate when I receive an email that somebody tells me that somebody's must be taking some money, because I don't know anybody who does that. That might happen elsewhere, but it sure does not happen in Lancaster, Ohio. So I want to reassure everybody that my friends sitting around City Council and my colleagues in administration, I know that they're not taking any money from anybody. As was stated before, and I stated it in another meeting that we had, I do have to rely on my city engineer, and I thank Mitch Nolan for all the work that he's done. First off, the city of Lancaster does need...
Hold on a second. She's probably still talking. We lost her. She's still going and we done lost her. You still there?
Did you do that on purpose?
No! We lost you. We lost you right after first of all, so go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, the city of Lancaster needs residential homes. We have a shortage of homes, and everyone knows that. The city of Lancaster needs jobs, and realizing that this could be tax monies to the city of Lancaster would be wonderful. City of Lancaster needs apartments, and for those out there who came to our meeting and said bad things about people who live in apartments, shame on you. Because Lancaster does need apartments for young families and for old families. City of Lancaster needs senior living. Now here's where I'm gonna change my course. However, I don't believe that Columbus Street is ready right now to handle this traffic. I think the city of Lancaster owes it to everyone to make provisions on that road. Make it a 4-lane. Then let's build whatever. That's all I need to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bobbitt. Anyone else who hasn't yet spoken who would like to? Yes, Ms. Teener.
Well, I've driven around there a lot, and I've spoken to a lot of people. I do want to address a few things. I remember the public hearing, an individual said that, and I think some people thought that Brad Hutchinson threatened people by saying there was going to be a pig farm going in there. That wasn't a threat, that's a reality. When something's zoned a certain way, like agriculture or whatever, there's anything that can go in there. So, you know, I don't think the man was trying to threaten anybody. I'm not buddies with Brad Hutchinson. I know him. I've talked to him before. I honestly don't think this is anything that he's done anything underhanded or anything. But, so having said that, of course to Mr. James, you know, about the view. I'm from Carroll. We lived in there, so we lived in Carroll since 1963. We used to come down to Lancaster behind the Highway Patrol Station. There was Sims Meese, and that was nice. I mean, so, you know, so the view thing to me at Timber Top isn't a thing because you guys are living in my view that I had growing up as a kid. But you're living there, and it's a nice neighborhood, and really for people in River Valley Highlands to talk about the view of Timber Top, well, you don't see that unless you're driving by. Now, I forgot your last name. You see it though, right? So the people across, so some issues to me weren't an issue. However, also the bus traffic. I've talked to people from the city of Lancaster, the transportation. They're not going to be going through River Valley Highlands. They're going to go down, maybe not even Columbus Street. They'll go down 33 and turn onto Election House Road. So there's not really going to be bus traffic. Maybe a few, but not a lot, unless they're going up to Targhee. However, having said that though, one thing that I do not like the commercial general. I don't like that. I don't want actually any of it to be commercial. I think it needs to be single family, residential, and that's what I think. Roxton Ravine, when we had the man here, he was going to buy that land on contingency that it was going to be zoned, I believe, commercial general. So, you know, Lemon, you know, I understand, you know, you purchased it and back in December, and I understand that, but, you know, sometimes you put the cart before the horse and maybe wait to see, because that's pretty expensive land there to buy, not knowing, you know, how this is gonna go. But to me, I don't want any commercial there. I think it needs to be single family, and that's just all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Teener. Anybody else like to come in on this discussion? Mr. Matlin.
So, coming from a freshman city council person, this has been interesting for me. First of all, we speak to the annexation. Coming from out of safety forces, I think these islands within the city, we should never have them. I know Timber Top has a piece at the back that's still outside the city, so it's technically not an island. But it makes for confusion in all areas of any kind of emergency services, as well as sitting through planning commission and having them try to figure out the right-of-ways on the roads and things like that. So as far as I'm concerned, the annexation is a no-brainer. I say, yeah, we should have it within the city because it's one of those islands. There's other places across Memorial Drive where right at Edian Memorial, those buildings there, that's an island in the city. And we shouldn't have that. And I think there's something in the Ohio Revised Code that speaks to that, and somehow we've not actually forced those pieces to be in the city. As far as the zoning, we had some people talk about how cool it would be to have a nice park up there or a bed and breakfast. Man, that would be awesome. And if we had two people standing up here or somebody by Mr. Perez that was willing to put millions of dollars into the city in a park or a bed and breakfast, and then somehow give the city operating money, I'd vote for that person rather than Mr. Perez. Unfortunately, they've purchased the land, and they're the only people standing here wanting to put money into the city. I have no trouble at all with the elderly care. with the adult living facilities. As far as the commercial general, it's there because across the road, those lots are commercial general. And the people that live in the houses on those lots probably didn't even realize it, but it is possible that somebody could come in and buy 2 of them houses and put a gas station in because they're already zoned that way. They probably were done that way when the Social Security office and Lowe's and all that was built a long time ago. So just so you know, if that goes away, I'm not stuck on the commercial general, but that's probably why it's that way. So as far as I'm concerned, this would be good. I mean, I have a concern about Hawthorne Drive and Mitch, and it's the construction traffic. If this goes through, I don't see them roads on Hawthorne or Whittier being able to handle construction traffic. I think the bed is too soft. You're going to end up ruining all that asphalt. And so if it happened, I think that connection probably shouldn't be made until there's actually people living back there. I mean, I don't see, just to save the streets, because if we start getting a lot of traffic on those, I can see us paving those streets a lot faster than they need to be paved now. And as far as the safety forces, I've heard people say that we can't handle, the city's safety forces can't handle the increased runs. Might be true, but I think this is probably going to take 2 years to get somebody living out there, and I would hope in 2 years we've figured something out with our money coming in and the general fund and the safety forces, and maybe we would be able to handle some extra traffic up there. Again, like I think Mrs. Downhour said, the traffic on Columbus Street, I think people are underestimating how much it's going to change when the Edie Road gets redone, when the election house interchange gets redone. I think traffic is going to be a lot different there when that happens, and we're not taking that into account enough. And the last thing I want to say is I sat in the back of the room when there were some contentious legislation here, and the first one I will talk about is Pearl House. There were so many people that didn't want that. They were constant, we don't want this, and they had all kinds of good reasons, I guess, for it. Since it's been built, and I was in on the construction of that as far as doing all the inspections, and it was built well and it was maintained well and still is. And I don't think that's been a problem since it came in. As far as EMS, as far as the police department runs, it has not been. So the fears were not realized. And the second one is the jail, the county jail. I think it's a good looking building. Yeah, you don't want a maximum security prison in the middle of your town, but it really doesn't look like that. And it allowed the county to centralize some services, and then now we're getting a historic building on top of Main Hill remodeled because of that. So if the jail wouldn't have happened, then I don't believe that Detective Bureau building would be getting remodeled, and that's on the historical registry, so I think that's a plus for us. So there was a lot of negatives. A lot of people didn't want the jail to come in town either, so that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mallon. Is there anyone else who hasn't yet spoken? Yes, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, I share many of the same concerns. Tom and I have spoken with a lot of people in the area, and contrary to popular belief, not all those people that I've spoken with have been opposed to the development. Many of them have been opposed to parts of it, or if this happens, I'm opposed to that idea. Traffic has been a major concern. I too have full confidence in our city engineer, the traffic study, and the city's administration and its efforts to make sure these things are done properly. Having been on that side of it, sat in staff safety committee meetings and watched why and how things are done, I do have full faith and confidence in that process. And I know one of the big concerns that neighbors have up there is the Hawthorne connection. And I think the city administration can tell you that wasn't Lemon Developers' plan. That is a city effort based on connectivity of neighborhoods, primarily for safety services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Director?
Yes.
I think Councilman's point on waiting to connect that, should this be approved, is probably how a developer would probably do it anyway, I would suspect. Why build something until you need it anyway? But I guess that's my opinion there. There's a lot of things that have come our way that have truly been misinformation, and I think Councilman Matlin's issue on Pearl House and the jail both highlight reasonable people with reasonable concerns that just didn't end up materializing. The jail has You know, we can argue about whether it should have been out at the far end of Westford Avenue, which would have created a substantial burden on the city of Lancaster, the police department, costing us manpower, staffing, etc., to transport prisoners to a jail that would have been a minute away versus having to transport and make sure our officers were safe out there with the chance of having something happen while you're transporting people. And it may not seem that far, but at 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, taking a prisoner that far does create additional burden on PD. Those things were all taken into effect from the city of Lancaster's position, at least the Lancaster Police Department's position. We wanted the jail near our department for ease of access to our officers. So, and it is a very well done facility. I think the water testing issue has all shown that the city's testing and guidelines and what we did along the way, the fears, legitimate concerns ended up not being, not panning out, not materializing. But what I would tell you is I understand, and there have been some great conversations with the people sitting right here in this audience, along with many, many others, phone calls, emails, direct conversations with people. My big concerns are the Hawthorne Spur, the additional traffic, and the commercial general. But I also have the flip side of the thought process is I believe a property owner has a right to develop their property as long as it's done in accordance with existing laws, regulations, and the good of the community. I guess that's my position.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Is there anyone else who would like to address this issue tonight? Look at you as the last remaining.
Am I last?
Yes, you are.
Am I last? I think everybody's been pretty good about hitting most of them. I mean, excuse the term, but this is one of those pieces that we sit up here and, you know, some people can feel we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. I mean, there's nobody in the audience currently that is included in an email at any point, I don't think, you know, accusing us of something underhanded, and we've been accused of that plenty. I just kind of want to reiterate that none of us, I mean, all of us are sitting up here in this room and around this table because we love the city. I think we take everything, you know, in front of us and try and make the best decision while we're looking at it from both aspects. From the beginning, you know, I was totally on board with the annexation for the reasons that, you know, what happens if we don't. I said it multiple times. You know, I just think we're down to not everybody's going to be happy one way or the other. I mean, we could upset Mr. Perez, or we could upset people in the room, and it's a stressful decision for us. Yeah, I think Ms. Teener brought it up before. You know, in our time on council, we've gotten grayer and heavier, and we get less sleep. That's I'm there with you. So, you know, if we were getting something on the side, I'd probably look better. But the fact of the matter is, like, I guess I want to ask a question and start the discussion because nobody has brought it up yet. You know, we discussed, you know, I thought, do we bring it up before this point? But, you know, my concern, you know, when we're talking about compromise, okay, I think everybody, with some of the most recent emails and what people said this evening is vote yes on annexation, vote no on the current proposed zoning. So that's really the question I want to bring up. I mean, I don't, you know, reading planning commission minutes from months ago, having these discussions for the last few months, having this discussion, I know that commercial general was a contentious piece to it. I think everybody, maybe not everybody, but I think it's something that we can look at amending or discussing further with Lemon, like, hey, do we need to have that? Do I think that it needs to all go down to single family residential? I'm gonna go out on the limb and say, I don't necessarily agree with that. You can stand at the corner of the timber top property
and see multifamily residential across and over the hill. I mean, you can see the top of it. So we sat in, what was that, last year before, Morpsey, it was like Ohio, Central Ohio 2050, you know, where are people going and towards a millennials? Are they building or buying single family residential? Do they want that responsibility? So, and then we sat here and listened to, hey, are these gonna be affordable apartments? You don't want low income, but you don't wanna pay $1,500 a month. So, you know, we talked about, we've heard, hey, don't build this project, we don't need multifamily over here because there's 3 other developments happening around town. But the idea is supply and demand. If you guys haven't noticed, your houses, even in your neighborhoods and my neighborhood, they're on the market for a week and they are selling for crazy amounts that I never thought something like that would sell for. And that's because there's not a lot going around. So when you're talking about 4 potential multifamily complexes going in, it drives up the supply, and hopefully it makes everything a little more affordable. Maybe those $1,200 apartments that we don't think are worth $1,200 will be $800 by the time we're done with these things. And that's the idea that I look at with this piece. So my question is anybody opposed to considering changing the zoning that we're looking at so we can?
You're
Ask him.
Yeah, you're speaking specifically about going from the CG to the CN.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Perez?
Yep. So what we have done to help, and I know this is all hard for everyone, but what we have done is looked at the CG that was currently on North Columbus on the west side, which is the pink. Thank you. And we have removed the CG and have put in the commercial neighborhood. So we've gone to CN. And from what I've heard from the opposition, and I'd like to talk, real quick about the opposition. You guys hear about this opposition, but I've gotten so many emails, so many phone calls about people that are excited about this project. They want to live in the condos. They're excited about the senior living. So it's not, I know you guys probably get a lot of the bad, but we've got a lot of phone calls, and I think on the condo side up on the RS3, we probably could have half of them sold by now. So that's a good thing. But what we're proposing today is taking the CG out, the commercial general, which was a lot of the opposition up front, and just changing it all to commercial neighborhood, which allows the multifamily piece and still our senior piece.
Very good. So we have a resolution to that effect that we have the potential to amend temporary ordinance 2019 star with that as we get to that particular ordinance in the process. So we'll be ready for that. Anyone have questions specific to that issue or want to address that? Ms. Tina?
Yes, I do. What exactly, I know it's commercial general, what exactly can go in commercial neighborhood? You have a list of.
Offices, doctor's offices.
It's more of a light retail, but and I could get into this, but right now, we have with this change pushed the apartments down now to the North Columbus side, okay, and then still our senior pieces here. We do have a purchase agreement for the multifamily piece. Like I said, we'll be working with the developer, making sure what's gone in is going to be up to standards, up to our standards. Obviously, the city will review that as well. So, right now, I mean, there is we have no plans for any retail or anything like that.
Right now.
Yes.
Right now. So it's like a Starbucks
No.
that you talked about before. I'm just trying.
No, there's no drive-through underneath the commercial general.
What that is. That's what I'm.
It's more of an office, a light, doctor's offices, different things like that.
Hey, Becky, you into 2019.
Yeah.
It's in there.
But the people
Well, hey, read them. They're all there.
So we can read it.
No, I think she was saying you could read it so that people could hear what it was.
Yes, sir.
But that's fine. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you for the question. Yes, Mr. James.
I've taken time to read through all of those changes, the commercial general versus commercial neighborhood. And one of the things that really is highlighted, and I'm very much impressed with, is the fact that you've now done a full topographical review of it. You know where the water's going to go, and the commercial neighborhood allows you then to put a detention or retention pond in place. And that's what commercial neighborhood allows you to do. So that's one of the reasons why you need that. I noticed that you had a big pond scheduled for what I would call the western part, clear up in the northwest corner, and you've still got that existing pond that's on the property as it stands.
And I think there'll be nice amenities, obviously.
Right.
And serve a function.
And in the discussions I've had with Mitch Nolan, he is very much interested in making sure that you control that water flow and get it to the point where you're going to not only take care of what you're building there, you're also going to help eliminate some of the runoff right now that goes into the Whittier neighborhood. As I mentioned, my daughter lived on a Marble Drive. Their backyard always was wet, and there's nothing they can do about that. And I know it might create a little heartburn for you guys on what you have to put in there, but Mitch Nolan, nothing against him. If you've met him, he's not going to let you get away with anything.
Oh, I definitely feel that.
You've already experienced that, haven't you?
And I think the big thing about this whole this water issue, there is nothing taking this water. All this water up on this north side is going wherever it wants. Yeah. So with us handling this water, capturing this water, and taking all of this water down to a central location, I mean, is it going to improve everything? Is everybody going to be absolutely happy? I can't guarantee that, but it cannot hurt the problem. It will definitely take the water right now that's going into this neighborhood, and we're taking our water, our runoff, and diverting it somewhere into our pond.
Very good. Thanks for that clarification.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Did you have questions you wanted to, and then I'll go to Corey.
I just had one question. Yes. Not necessarily with the proposed zoning change, but with what you're proposing to build, how far away from the residence will, say, the retirement or senior living center, like, what's the distance that's going to be between your building and somebody's backyard?
We'll be well within the city setbacks. And even more on the senior side. If you can see on the apartment side where Woodland Heights are, we have at least, I mean, there's hundreds of feet there, plus with the pond. So that side will be buffered. The residential up here, obviously, this will butt up to the residential. So we'll follow all the city setbacks and everything, but I feel like on the definitely on the multifamily side, we'll be well within the city requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dyer. Mr. Schoonover.
I wanted to address I mentioned the commercial general. I wanted to address the Hawthorne connection. And I guess listing the concerns in order of what in terms of importance. I think the Hawthorne connection was a big thing for that neighborhood. I know that you guys would prefer not to have it as well. I guess my question is really to City Engineer Nolan, if he could maybe address, do we have some different options other than that? Mr. McDaniel and I talked at some point about similar to Independence Boulevard off of Rainbow Drive, 1 point in, 1 point out, that type of situation, or even like a setup that River Valley Highlands has, like Scenic Drive. Is that a possibility? Because my concern would be the connection. There's going to be a connection to the north of this property where Pulte is, and River Valley Highlands, which I think should make River Valley Highlands folks happy, because when we were restricting traffic, when we were doing the hospital stuff, and everyone in River Valley Highlands was upset because they wanted another exit out of the development. So this gives an exit, maybe not where they necessarily want or hoped, but I thought, hey, development or exit out the back of that development over to Edie Road Election House Road would be fantastic, but not feasible. I already talked to the landowner, and plus there's a huge gas issue, gas easement back there. So, but my concern is when that connection, if that connection's made, you know, do the buses go from one tardy to the other and they use Hawthorne? You know, that, I would not be happy about that either. So can we do something different that would eliminate that connection into the Whittier neighborhood?
So let's talk about this in a couple different categories. And so the first thing I'll say is it's city code that you have to have 2 points of ingress and egress. Okay, it's in the subdivision regulations. It's part of what we look at when we review preliminary plans. That's the purpose why people put little stub streets out. You know, every time that, say, the River Valley Highlands expands, there's always stub streets because we don't want these disconnected neighborhoods. First off, you know, in city government, we talk about this quite a bit. Staff Safety Committee. I know Mr. McDaniel was part of that. There's been so many people that are a part of staff safety because we realize after, you know, certain things happen, oh, we've got some choke points, we have this we're dealing with, and we're trying to mitigate those things, but we have limited resources because of maybe things that occurred or how the order in which they develop. It just kind of gives us heartburn at this time. I'm excited about this project as a whole in creating some new avenues to the River Valley Highlands sections, and my personal opinion is the more connectivity you have, it gives people more options. It creates less bottlenecks, and it allows for the distribution of traffic to occur over a large area versus certain confined areas, okay? Is there ways to mitigate that in safety conditions? We talk about boulevard type entrances, and there are provisions in the subdivision code that allows for boulevard type entrances to kind of has segregated traffic. It's not, you know, confined. Do I think that this here, this particular, these stub streets, they were designed to be extended? And in my opinion, as an engineer and looking holistically at the city as a whole and what the best interest of the city is that Hawthorne connection does need connected. It's hard to anticipate the future of a city and how it develops over time. And when you don't obtain right-of-ways and connectivity at the time that you feel that you're doing these types of developments and final plats and all these dedication of right-of-ways, you miss something when you start segregating and not connecting communities and connecting subdivisions together. And I realize that. I live on a cul-de-sac street. It's actually a temporary turnaround. It could be extended, and I know that it's nice. When my kids were little, I loved it because, you know, no one came down my street. But I know that the purpose of that is for something greater. Okay, and I realize the opposition of this is that, you know, they want their community and they want less traffic and things like that. I get that. I understand it. I've experienced it even personally. However, when I look at what the best interest of the city is, I don't think that's the best interest of the city. And the code that we have, that we work from, the subdivision code, doesn't portray that either.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Further comments or discussion before we go to a member of the administration? Yes, Mr. Matlin.
So just for a point of, I don't know, some more information, I think at the last planning commission meeting, Mitch might speak to the Pulte company that owns the property in the back off Old Ridge. That has been stagnant for a while because everybody knows they tried to put houses in and they hit rock and all that. They were at planning commission this last meeting and are requesting, and I can't remember what they were requesting, but I think we're going to get something because they want to start, this has spurred them to start wanting to build again to get their Old Ridge Avenue connected, and and build things there, so.
Yeah, obviously, I've been in contact with Pulte, and that section that was, it was, you know, this far from them recording the final plat and, you know, dedicating the right-of-way. They had started construction, obviously had ran into bedrock. My discussions with Pulte here recently have been that revising construction drawings, shallowing up the sewer, making a different product. Their product would have maybe more of a slab on grade component versus the basement component, which is what they built in River Valley Highlands multiple times. But they're obviously also, when they shut down, you know, the market wasn't the best. They weren't getting the you know, some of the pricing that they really wanted, but as the economy has expanded, that has changed their view in getting this this next phase. I forget what it is, Section 13.3 or whatever, fired up again. So, so there is this, you know, the connectivity of that main road and their Oldridge Avenue back there. That to me is going to make a added benefit to a lot of citizens that live in that back area. And, you know, I know we deal with that a lot on Greencrest Drive, so.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Thank you, Mr. Mallett. Further comments or discussion regarding the timber top legislation? Mr. Martin, did I see you waving your hand there?
Well, I was just going to mention, he mentioned the subdivision code, but also in our fire code, it also recommends a second egress into a subdivision. Those were probably not in existence in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. But yes, we are the ones that's imposing a connection through Hawthorne. It is not the Lemon Group. They would be pleased to not do it. But safety services, of course, you would expect this out of my answer. I have seen situations where I'm very concerned about when you're bringing in assets for a fire in a house, we bring in from different angles, different directions. And I know they survived for decades without it, and that would be their argument. I hear that. But it is the city imposing this upon Lemon to make that connection.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Yeah, I'll just mention a couple of process items here quickly. Engineer Nolan had said that it's hard to understand and to envision how a city will get built out, and many around here would remember that back several decades ago, we thought everything was going to go out East Main Street way, and there was development there, and that didn't happen, and then River Valley Highlands blew up on the clear other side of town. So it is difficult to envision just what exactly is going to happen, no matter how much effort is put into it. The other thing I'll mention, and Mr. Stoughton brought it up in his comments, that, you know, that we would be potentially handing a blank check to the developer, but this is really, if this were to pass tonight, step 3 of about 347 that the developer has to go through regarding approvals and submissions and things like that. And so because of all of the code requirements, this isn't just going to get passed if it were to pass and, you know, start seeing things happen tomorrow. There's significant work that remains and compliance issues that would need to take place in order for the developer to move forward. And so I just, you know, to disavow anyone of that thought that this is indeed just, you know, a blank check that they'll get to go and do whatever they want. That's just not the way it works. Other thoughts or comments before we begin to entertain motions on this legislation? No, Mr. Lemon, or I'm sorry, Mr. Perez, anything else you'd like to mention as we close?
I would be willing to limit construction traffic during construction on.
Yes. We're going to make sure you do.
I know you are, right? I know you are. And that's something that could be easily done. You know, one more thing that just real quick on the property values, and I know that's brought up. It was brought up again here tonight. We have another project, actually a senior living project and a multifamily piece in North Canton, up the street from our first Danbury building. This is Sanctuary Green in North Canton. We bought a golf course there. And we built our senior building. We actually started on the residential homes and then built our senior building and have apartments across the street, but continue to build, to sell off lots to residential home builders in our area. And I mean, we're on, I don't even know what phase, the 4th or 5th phase on there. And they're great homes. I mean, they're $300,000 plus $400,000 homes. So it definitely hasn't, from having our senior building there, our apartments, you know, everything's right there. Definitely has not, you know, hurt property values. If anything, it's made people want to be there. So,
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Thank you for being here this evening.
all right.
With that, if there's no other comments or thoughts on the legislation, Melody, you still with us?
I am.
Excellent, she is still with us. Yes, I check it every once in a while, and it still looks like she's connected. So very good. Yes, Mr. Stoughton.
Can I offer kind of a summary before we get to the other?
You sure can.
Well, so we've gone around the table. Everyone has spoken. The public has spoken. The developer has spoken. City council has spoken. The administration has spoken. And the one thing that comes out of here is you understand that no one around this table is taking this particular voting process lightly. You've heard discussions about from 9 different people talking about making sure that we're not commercial general and move to neighborhood. Housing needs versus traffic was a discussion. We had Ms. Downhour actually visited developments. Mr. James talks about the due diligence that he went through. Mrs. Teener talks about, when she remembers that whole area being, a park-like setting or a country of time setting. Mr. Matlin, I'm glad you brought up, the Pearl House, the county jail, the water supply, all those things that never came to fruition. Mr. McDaniel talked about actually getting out amongst the people and talking with folks, and I'm sure he's heard people that were pro as well as people that were con, but got out there and talked to those folks. I've been in this business this is my 17th year sitting in this chair, I think, if I counted it right. And we've had, a dozen of these types of decisions, and Jack is right. The fears never really materialize into what they were when, prior to the council moving forward with, if we opt to move forward, if they never seem to materialize in the way in which they were presented. So I want to commend my colleagues around council. I thought you all did a wonderful job doing the homework. A lot of different people did a lot of different pieces of homework and shared amongst us. So I want the residents here to understand that we do work, we do share information, and it's all public information. But it is important that we get informed on these things. So we did not take any of this lightly. So with that, Mr. President, I will yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton, for that summary. Anyone else who wants to comment one final time before we move forward?
Is the peanut gallery allowed to say just one small thing?
Unfortunately not, ma'am. I'm sorry. Only during voter and taxpayer time. All right, with that, then we are ready to move forward, it seems, and I believe at this time it would be appropriate to accept motions on temporary ordinance 19-19. We'll look to Mr. Hall as the chairman of law, which is the committee that sponsored this and initially put it on the table to make any motions he sees fit. Mr. Hall.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion the council remove from the table ordinance temporarily numbered 19-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove from the table temporary ordinance 19-19. This is a privileged motion and does not allow for debate. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 19-19 has been taken from the table and is now before us. Mr. Hall, what is your pleasure?
Mr. President, I would like to now make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary numbered 19-19.
Second.
Mr. Thank you so much. That's all right. We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 19-19. Is there any discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
No.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 19-19 passes 8-1. We now have before us, and we'll take motions on temporary ordinance 20-19.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table ordinance temporarily numbered 20-19 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary ordinance 20-19 star. Please call the roll.
Bear with me just 1 second here.
You take your time.
I had to find a spot to open on our sheet.
No problem.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
No.
Motion to take from the table has passed 8-1. Temporary ordinance 20-19 star is before us. Mr. Hall, what's your pleasure?
Yes, Mr. President, at this point, I would like to defer to Councilman James on the second part of this motion.
Mr. James.
Mr. President, at this time, I would like to make a motion to replace resolution temporarily numbered 20-19 star with temporary resolution 20-19 star, as it's been proposed to change the commercial general designation to commercial neighborhood.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary ordinance 20-19 star and replace it with temporary ordinance 20-19 star, which impacts the zoning of commercial general to commercial neighborhood as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting. Mr. James, would you like to discuss?
I think we've gone through a whole lot of discussion on this whole issue. I expressed my heartburn over having a commercial general component to that because the neighborhood, I don't believe, is suitable for that. And I agree with everybody that spoke tonight about that issue. I also understand that the commercial neighborhood gives them the necessary options to put the detention and retention ponds in the places where they need to be.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. James. Is there further discussion on the motion to amend? If not, we'll ask the clerk call the roll on the motion to amend.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to amend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table resolution temporarily numbered 128-19.
We're still working with temporary ordinance 20-19 star
Oh, I am
at this
so
point.
sorry.
That's okay.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution, ordinance temporarily numbered 20-19 star.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 20-19 star. Discussion.
Not at this time.
Other discussion around the table. Okay. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
No.
Temporary ordinance 20-19 star passes 8-1. We'll now entertain motions on temporary resolution 128-19.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table resolution temporarily numbered 128-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary resolution 128-19. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
Not at this time.
Other discussion on the, oh wait, we can't discuss this. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
He's still thinking about it, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
and Mrs. Tina.
Yes.
Motion to take from the table has passed. Temporary resolution 128-19 is before us. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 128-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 128-19. Discussion, Mr. Hall. Further discussion around the table. Please call the roll. Ms. Bobby, you still there?
I am.
Excellent. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
No.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Tina.
No.
Temporary resolution 128-19 passes 7-2. We'll now entertain motions on temporary resolution 129-19.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table resolution temporarily numbered 129-19.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary resolution 129-19. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
Mrs. Tina.
Yes.
The motion to take from the table passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 129-19 is now before us. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 129-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 129-19. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
No, not at this time.
Discussion around the table. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Tina.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 129-19 passes 9-0. With that, we have concluded the work that we set out to conclude as we went out of the regular order of business. I wonder, Mr. Stoughton, if you might place us into a 5-minute recess to allow, one, those residents who have come to take their leave, and two, for city council members to take whatever action or business they need to take during this time. Mr. Stoughton.
Isn't this called leading the witness?
Yes.
I'd like to make a, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council take a 5-minute recess.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a 5-minute recess. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are in recess. Thank you all very much. To the residents who came here tonight under these difficult circumstances, thank you for being here as well. Have a good day. We are in recess. In the regular order of business, please.
Leading the witness. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council returns to the regular order of business, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to return to the regular order of business. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The clerk is telling me we're going to do a roll call. Roll call, please. I know we did, yeah.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Tina.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. We are now back to the regular order of business. Let me just echo quickly Mr. Stoughton's comments and say thank you to each one of you around the table for your work over these last many weeks and couple of months. I do think there was a good discussion, a robust discussion. I think all of the comments were taken into consideration, and just wanted to say I appreciate your work and diligence over these last few weeks on what is really is a challenging decision in the face of opposition, but yet nevertheless you did your work well, so I appreciate that. With that, we are back in the regular order of business now, and we'll move to the second reading of temporary resolution 41-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the General Fund 101 and amend a certificate with the county auditor, offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Downhour.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 41-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 41-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
This resolution is to take care of a shortage due to an employee in the law director's office having a change in circumstance as it relates to health insurance coverage. And in lieu of the Corona-19, I would like to go ahead and get this passed.
Very good. Yes, as a matter of note and process, we are working to suspend on as many pieces as we can tonight, given that we're unsure when we might be meeting next. So with that, is there further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 41-20.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 41-20. Further discussion, Ms. Downhour.
No, thank you.
Discussion around the table. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 41-20 passes 9-0. We now have before us temporary resolution 42-20.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fittings for use by the Division of Water, offered by Mr. James, second by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Yes, this resolution will replenish some of their needs in terms of inventory for various pipes and fittings that they will be doing a whole lot of work this summer, hopefully, on replacing some of those. And since this is already the second reading, I think we're ready to proceed.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon this written record resolution temporarily numbered 42-20.
Before the motion to pass, sir, we'll need a motion to suspend.
This was already second reading, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And if we don't have 3 readings, we've got to suspend the third.
You're right,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
thank
my
you.
fault.
It's okay.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution numbered 42-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 42-20. Further discussion, Mr. James?
No, not at this time.
Other discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. James?
At this point in time, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 42-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 42-20. Further discussion, Mr. James?
Not at this time.
Other discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 42-20 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 43-20.
A resolution to increase appropriations in the Public Sites and Open Spaces Fund 231, offered by Mrs. Teener, second by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Teener?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 4320.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 43-20. Discussion, Ms. Teener?
Not this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 43-20 passes, suspension passes 9-0. We now have 43-20 before us. Ms. Teener?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution, temporary resolution 4320.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 43-20. Discussion, Ms. Tina.
Yes, this is regarding increase and decrease funds for the Bauer Park site. If Tricia could speak to that.
Yeah, the Parks Department, when they did their 2020 budget, inadvertently put those funds in the wrong account. They put it in the contingency account when it was supposed to be in the miscellaneous non-fixed asset account. So he had to come to City Council due to that was his complete budget. He just is recentering it into the correct account.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Tina? No. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 43-20 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 44-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Parks and Recreation Fund 212 and amend the certificate with the county auditor. Offered by Mrs. Teener, seconded by Mrs. Bobbit.
Ms. Tina.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council suspend this rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 4420.
Replace.
Oh, we need to amend that one.
We need to replace that.
That's okay.
That's what I was looking when I was.
I'm so sorry. Mr. President, I'd like to,
Make a motion to
make
amend.
a motion to amend temporary resolution 44-20
And replace it.
and replace it with temporary resolution 44-20 star.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary resolution 44-20 and replace it with resolution 44-20 stars given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting. Discussion, Ms. Tina.
Just that this is added competitive bidding on purchasing of a mower for the Parks Department.
Okay, very good. Further discussion on the amendment. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to amend passes 9-0. We don't have temporary resolution 44-20 star before us. Ms. Tina.
So, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading on temporary resolution 4420 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading on temporary resolution 44-20 star. Discussion.
Not this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 4420 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 44-20 star. Ms. Teener.
It's just adding language, like I said, to this resolution so that they, for competitive bidding to buy a mower for the Parks Department,
Very good.
through the Parks Department.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 44-20 star passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 45-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Parks and Recreation Fund 212 and amend the certificate with the county auditor. Offered by Mrs. Teener, seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Teener.
Second of three readings, please.
Second reading on temporary resolution 45-20. Temporary resolution 47-20.
A resolution to decrease increase appropriations in the General Fund 101 Engineering Department. Offered by Mrs. Downauer, seconded by Mrs. Bobbit.
Ms. Downauer.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 47-20.
Second.
We We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 47-20. Ms. Downhour, discussion?
No, I'll save it for that.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 47-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 47-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
This is a resolution to really make a correction in the accounts. An employee who was retired from the engineering department was paid out of the wrong account, and this corrects that error.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 47-20 passes 9-0. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 50-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 101, offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 50-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 50-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour?
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Downhour?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 50-20.
Second?
We have a motion.
Second.
Oh, it's all over the place. Lots of
I don't think
seconds.
so. Not your turn.
We're still on 50. Yeah, that's okay. We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 50-20. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, this is a resolution to cover the cost of the recent audit requested by the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System.
Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 50-20 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 51-20.
Mr. President, I'm sorry.
That's okay. She's just working to file her paperwork over here.
I'm not trying to rush you,
That's
sorry.
okay.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the Broad Mulberry Sewer Separation Project, offered by Mr. James, second by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 51-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 51-20. Discussion on the motion to suspend, Mr. Hall.
Mr. James?
Mr. James. I was looking the right way, just said the wrong name.
He's a lot better looking than I am.
That's all right.
I'll save it for when we.
Very good. Further discussion or any discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. James.
Mr. President, at this time, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon a written record temporary resolution numbered 51-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 51-20. Mr. James.
This is one of those situations where they need to start this project quickly to take advantage of the weather. That's much I need to say about it.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 51-20 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 52-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amending certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 101, offered by Mrs. Downhour, seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 52-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 52-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 52-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 52-20. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, this resolution is to take care of the special assessment on the Hunters Run Conservatory District from the tax year 2019.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 52-20 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 53-20.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of utilities billing software for use by the Utilities Collection Department, offered by Mrs. Teener, seconded by Mrs. Bobbit.
Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 5320.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 53-20. Ms. Teener.
No discussion at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5320.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 53-20. Discussion, Ms. Teener.
Yes, this is just for, because utilities office, say that their software is from the 1990s and they're just going out to bid. This is not a purchase. They would still have to come back to council if they find something for us to approve it, but this is just to go out for bid.
Thank you, Ms. Teener. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 53-20 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 54-20.
A resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of Lancaster to negotiate and enter into a CHIP partnership agreement with the Board of Fairfield County Commissioners to file a combined application under the Community House Impact and Preservation CHIP program to address local housing needs, offered by Mrs. Downhour, seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 54-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 54-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 54-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 54-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
Yes, this resolution actually allows us to do a joint application with Fairfield County for the CHIP program, and as was covered in finance, this will allow community action to help administer the program and will enable us to benefit from that administration and hopefully have a successful program jointly rather than individually.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 54-20 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 55-20.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding under the Omnia national bid process and into a contract for the roof replacement of the city annex building, authorize any then and now certificates coming from this project appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Capital Improvement Fund 320, and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor. Offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 55-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 55-20. Ms. Downhour.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 55-20.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 55-20. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, this resolution solidifies the amounts that will be necessary to replace the roof on the annex building, and it is the breakdown that we've been waiting for. We've been discussing it over the last several council meetings, and we definitely need to get this roof replaced.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 55-20 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 56-20.
A resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate with the county auditor and the FEMA Fund 240. Offered by Mrs. Bobbitt, second by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Bobbitt.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings on temporary resolution 56-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 56-20. Discussion, Ms. Bobbitt.
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Bobbitt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 56-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 56-20. Discussion, Ms. Bobbitt.
Yes, thank you, and I want to take the opportunity right now to thank both chiefs for being there this evening. I saw them on the TV, I saw Denise there, I saw Mitch there, if I missed anybody else, but I really appreciate them being there. I know I could call the chief back up, Chief Ward back up, but I'm not going to do this. This is a grant, because he already discussed it in finance. This is a great grant that the fire department is receiving, so I want to thank the chief and all the, everyone who helped work to get these monies into the city, into the fire department. Almost $172,000. It's a lot of money. With a 10% payout that we have to spend out, but that's going to come out of Fire Impact Fund.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Bobbitt. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 56-20 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 57-20.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to utilize CBIZ to evaluate the market and negotiate for employee benefits offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mrs. Bobbit.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 57-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 57-20. Ms. Downhour.
I'll save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 57-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 57-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour?
Yes, this resolution is so that we can engage CBIZ to begin to look at evaluating the health insurance market. As we've discussed previously during budget season, our health insurance premiums have increased significantly, and we need to be cost conscious as well as maintain coverage. And so by engaging CBIZ, we should be able to research the health insurance market effectively.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 57-20 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 58-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriation of county auditor in the Fire Impact Fund 322, offered by Mrs. Bobbit, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Ms. Bobbit.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass or suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution number 5820.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 58-20. Discussion, Ms. Bobbit?
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Bobbit.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution number 5820.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 58-20. Discussion, Ms. Bobbit.
And just as I said before, the chief talked to us during finance. This is to appropriate the grant funds that we took in. We're going to purchase new air packs, new hoses, and equipment needed for the new truck that's going to be coming in May. I'm probably missing some things that he said, but it's a great grant opportunity with only a 10% match.
Thank you, Ms. Bobbit. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 58-20 passes 9-0. Are there any other resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move on to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the third reading of Temporary Ordinance 4-20.
An ordinance amending the zoning map for the 18.939 acre property between North Memorial Drive and North Columbus Street, Nelson Road, parcel numbers 0532152400, 0532152600, 0532144900, and 0532145000. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council place this ordinance 4-20 on the table.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to place temporary ordinance 4-20 on the table. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
I'll just quickly note as a matter of procedure that we have a public hearing set on this Monday, April 13th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers should we be able to meet. Temporary ordinance 4-20 is placed on the table 9-0. Temporary ordinance 5-20.
An ordinance amending the zoning map for the 21-acre property consisting of 3 parcels located along Campground Road and including the existing residence address 1443 Campground Road. Parcel numbers 05310041000, 05310043000, and 05314004110. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, and for the same reason, the required public hearing on April 13th. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council place on the table ordinance temporary numbered 5-20.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to place upon the table temporary ordinance 5-20. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 5-20 is placed upon the table. We have no ordinances for second reading. We'll move to the first reading of temporary ordinance 6-20.
An ordinance amending the zoning map for 12.646 acre tract parcel number 05340000700 behind 2535 East Main Street. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. McDaniel.
First reading.
First reading on temporary ordinance 6-20. Now I have temporary ordinance 7-20 before us.
An ordinance authorizing emergency measures in response to the COVID-19 virus and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 7-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 7-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour? Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 7-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 7-20. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
Yes, this ordinance is so that if there is any type of city emergency where city council is not able to meet, it will allow the mayor, the head of the finance committee, and the auditor to continue with regular business and pay bills as necessary. And when council is able to meet again, we will then bring anything that was taken care of by this group back to council for approval.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. I'll just note briefly that it's, and we talked about this in finance, this is for this particular emergency only, the way this ordinance is written. And we will deal with future opportunities to do something like this once we get things back to normal after this crisis. Other discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 7-20 passes 9-0. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council? If not, is there any further action on tabled legislation this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business this evening? If not, is there any new business this evening?
Mr. President.
Mr. Hall.
Just really quickly, the shelter and stay order by the governor is likely to be over the week before our next scheduled council meeting. But April 13th might not be a safe time to hold a public hearing. So we may want to consider, if we can, moving that hearing back.
I appreciate your optimism that the shelter-in-place order is going to be over by the 6th. I'm not sure. I concur. Nevertheless, I don't disagree. What I'd like to recommend is that we just kind of let it ride for another week or so, and then we can come back. Because what will have to happen is, if we do move it, the city engineer and his gang will have to go out and have to repost at the property all of that signage, and so there's some funds that are involved in that. And so if we can meet, I think we should. But before we make that decision, I'd like to recommend we just try to see if we can get there first. Yes.
I must also notify the property owners 30 days in advance of a public hearing.
Okay.
And there's 80-some on one property, so it's a little timely. We need to make sure we get it in the paper, and it's 14 days apart. No. It has to go in there 7 days apart, but 2 times, and 30 days.
And 30 days prior.
Just an FYI.
So I agree with the sentiment. I'd just like to see if we can get a little further down the road before we actually make the call.
That makes sense. And just so you know, from the standpoint of looking at influenza data, which is the closest analog that we have to COVID-19, 35% of all influenza deaths over the last 10 years occurred in January. There's a significant drop in February, another drop in March, and then by May, only about 3% of influenza deaths occur in May, and it drops to below 1% in June through September. So there is likely to be a respite from all of this. We're not likely to see much of that in April, so there could still be a pretty significant degree of risk.
Sure.
At least through April.
Yeah, and as I read the governor's order, and we might need the law director to take a closer look, but it appears as though as essential services we could be exempted from it. So the question becomes not could we meet, but should we meet, in your words, is whether or not it's a good idea. And so, again, as we get a little further down the road, I think we can communicate via email and maybe decide how best to move forward. Yes, Mr. Law Director.
Just kind of an update with regard to, right now, well, Ms. Bobbitt, participating or whatever telephonically, that was due to the March 13th letter from Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost that made that possible. But I just want to make you all aware there is House Bill 557 was introduced on March 16th at the Ohio State House, and they are looking to basically, what I want to say, statutorily create, that exception or whatever to conduct these meetings telephonically or through video conferencing or things like that. So.
And that would be in any time or just in an emergency, or?
Probably just I would assume or whatever, just an emergency or whatever, because otherwise they want participation of the public and full transparency and people in person or whatever, the legislative body in person. So
very good.
I'll keep following that, and hopefully they will do something with that, because that definitely gives us more grounds to figure out how we go through this.
Thank you. 557.
I would agree, and I think that it's a great thing to have available, but the concern is that April 13th is a public hearing. So how are we going to have a public hearing through the telephone?
Yeah, we really couldn't. And when you read the letter from AG Yost, it talks about how a council member or someone could dial in order to participate and to help make a quorum. In my mind, though, it may stretch to it. It doesn't say that we can all do that, like that we could all do that, and there certainly would be no way to have a public hearing and allow the public to participate. So it is possible we're going to have to push this back. But before I guess I'd just like to try to get another week or so down the road, because if we have to push it back, we have to push it back. That money is going to get incurred one way or another. If there would be an opportunity for us to get together, and I don't know how we do that and bring the public in and feel safe about that, it's very likely it will get pushed, but we might just wait another week or so to see what happens, unless someone has a significant concern about just seeing how all this shakes out.
I have to go to work regardless.
Becky's getting up to go to work no matter what.
I don't get that.
Yeah. So we'll just note that it's very likely that that public hearing is going to get pushed, but we'll kind of in the next week or so go down that road when we have to. Okay. Further new business this evening then. Yes, Ms. Tina.
I do want to bring up something. I don't know if most of you know this, but the Lancaster City Schools have pulled together. All last week, they've been serving lunches to kids. You can go, just drive up. All the schools are doing it except for Tarhee. You can go to River Valley Highlands. There's 3 different places. You can go online. I've been posting it on Facebook. You can go to the website. These women and the bus drivers are packing the vans. It comes like this. You get breakfast and lunch. It's from 11:30 to 1, and if I can open this up.
You've been hoarding snacks over there the whole night?
Let me tell you.
What in the world are you doing?
He's depriving the rest of
I'll tell you what.
You can't have any of this. I kind of feel like I stole something from a kid, but I didn't. But remember when, we had our little field trips, like Mom might do a peanut butter sandwich, and that was the only time you could take like pop. Remember those days? That was the only time you could have pop. But I'm telling you, every bag has this, 2 milks, you have a vegetable, you have cheese. This is just today's. You have a peanut butter and jelly. You have apple juice, applesauce. And then, let's see, goldfish crackers, and then this is a cinnamon stick for breakfast. So like you can have lunch, and then in the morning you can have breakfast. So the Lancaster City, as of Friday, they served almost 6,800 lunches. That was just last week. So it's going to continue through this week. It's not going to be during spring break. But if the governor decides to move on, they're going to still do it through the schools, until they go back to school. But this is what they are doing. So, and every day. So I've been out there every day except for today. I wasn't able to go pass out, but I mean, it's really a great thing that we're doing. So if you can even, spread it out there too and let people know, it would be good. So, but this is just one day.
That is great. Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Tina. Very good. Other new business. If not, let me just take a moment to say thank you to some people. First, to Interface Video, to the crew for being here tonight, first of all, and second of all, for their work to get everything set up in our new condition here, and as well as helping to get Miss Bobbitt piped in. You still with us there, Miss Bobbitt?
I sure am.
All right, so that worked out well. We appreciate you guys and your help. I also want to thank the clerk who came over and worked to get everything set up and sanitized and people where they belong, so we appreciate that. And both the chiefs, as Ms. Bobbitt had mentioned, for being here tonight, as well as the other city officials that were here throughout the discussion for Timbertop. And finally, again, to each one of you for being out tonight as we work our way through the business that is before us. I wanted to say thanks to each one. Other new business tonight before we move on? If not, we'll ask the clerk to announce our scheduled meetings.
Scheduled meeting, April 13th at 6:30 p.m. We have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 4-20 and 5-20. The meeting following is April 27th at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings, I have one finance committee meeting, April 13th at 6 p.m. in council chambers. All others have been canceled. The next meeting wouldn't be until finance on April 27th.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are none to be presented.
Is there a need for an executive session? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Ms. Bobbitt? Thank you very much. She doesn't care. She's just going to hang up. We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Members of council, if you'll just hang in your seats, the clerk will come by and drop your legislation in front of you so that you can sign it. She'll then collect it and take it to the next person. That way we don't have to, breach the 6-foot rule here. I appreciate each one of you again, and thanks for being out tonight. Have a great week. We'll be in communication about future meetings as we go. We are adjourned.